Hello everyone, myself Dr. S. MOHAMED NAZEER. This class I am going to teach you microeconomics. In microeconomics, wage. What is wage? Wage is the price paid to the laborer for the services rendered by him. This is the meaning of wage. Definition. According to Benham, a sum of money under contract by an employer to a worker for service rendered. This is a definition of wage. Wage is nothing but the price paid to the laborer for the services rendered by him. How the land is getting rent, how the capital is getting interest, how the entrepreneur is getting profit, like that the laborer will get wage. Okay, now see the types of wage. There are 4 types. Nominal wage or money wage. Number 2, real wage. Number 4, piece wage. Number 3, piece wage. Number 4, time wage. Let's see one by one. Nominal wage or money wage. Nominal wage referred to the wages paid in terms of money. That is, the remuneration received by the labor in terms of cash is called nominal wage or money wage. So, the laborer is getting remuneration from the owner by cash. In terms of cash, this is called money wage or nominal wage. Now real wage. Real wage or the purchasing power of the money wage. Real wage or the purchasing power of the money wage. In other words, the real wage refers to the goods and services which the laborer enjoy by the money wage. That is, it depends upon the price level. That is, it depends upon the price level. If the price is high, the purchasing power is low, and hence the real wage is low and vice versa. So the real wage is based on the purchasing power of the money wage. Now piece wage. Wage that are paid on the basis of quantum of work are called piece wage. Number 4, time wage. Wage that are paid on the basis of amount of time that the worker works are called time wage. Okay. These are the types of wage. Now I am going to explain factors determining the real wage. Okay, in economics, real wage is a very important concept. So now I am going to explain the factors determining the real wage. The first factor, the purchasing power of the money. The real wage is the purchasing power of the money wage. If the price high, the purchasing power is low and hence the real wage is low and vice versa. So, the first factor is the purchasing power. The number 1, the method of payment. If the wage is paid in terms of goods, it is real wage. Wage paid in terms of goods increases the real wage. If the wage is paid in terms of goods, increases the real wage. The second factor is method of payment. The third factor, extra earnings. In the calculation of real wage, extra earning must be taken into consideration. If there is a scope for making extra earning, the real wage is high. So after your working hours, you are getting some work and you are earning some money. So it will increase your real wage. Nature of job. In some case, workers have to do work without any remuneration. Okay, this will reduce the real wage. Then the fifth factor, the determining the real wage, working condition. The real wage are higher if there are more holidays, more leisure and less hours of work. Okay, if the work is dangerous, the real wage is low. The sixth factor, the regularity of the job. If the job is permanent, the real wage is high. If the job is seasonal or temporary, the real wage is low. The seventh factor, which are determining the real wage, the period and the cost of training. The period and the cost of training. When a job needs long period and a high cost of training, when a job needs a long period and a high cost of training, it will tend to reduce the real wage. Okay, the eighth factor, social prestige. some jobs which even though carry comparatively low wage, some job even though carry comparatively lower wage, their social prestige being very high, the real wage is high. So the social prestige is one of the important factors determining the real wage. These are the factors determining the real wage. Now I am going to explain theories of wage. The following are the most important theories of wage. Number 1, the subsistence theory of wage. Number 2, the standard of living theory of wage. Number 3, the wage fund theory of wage. Number 4, the residual claimant theory of wage. Number 5, the marginal productivity theory of wage. Number 6, the demand and supply theory of wage. Let's see one by one. The first theory is the subsistence theory of wage. The subsistence theory of wage. According to this theory, wage must be equal to the subsistence level of the labor and his family. Subsistence means the minimum amount of food, clothing, shelter which worker and his family required for existence. Okay, this is called the subsistence. If worker are paid higher wages than the subsistence level, if the worker are paid higher wages than the subsistence level, the worker should be better off and they will have large families and the population would increase. When population increase, the supply of labor increase and therefore wage should be brought down. On the other hand, if wages are lower than the subsistence level, there would be a reduction in population and thereby supply of labor falls until wages are increased to subsistence level. So this theory is closely associated with the Malthusian theory of population. Therefore, this theory holds that the wages of workers should not be above or below the subsistence level of labor and his family. I already told you subsistence means the minimum amount of food, cloth, shelter which a worker and his family required for existence. So the wage should be equal to this subsistence level. Okay. Criticism of this theory. This theory ignored about the trade unions in collective bargaining. Okay, nowadays the owner cannot give the subsistence level of wage to labor. Okay, labor have a strong trade union. Okay, they will bargain more wage. This theory does not explain the differences in wage in different occupations. This does not explain differences in wage in different occupations. According to this theory, population should increase without a rise in wage rate. It is wrong. Okay, in historically it is proved as a wrong. This theory deals with the supply side labor only and completely neglect the demand side of labor in the determination of wage. So in the determination of wage, both supply and demand wants to come in the picture. This theory is based on Malthusian theory of population, which is severely criticized by the modern economists. Okay, these are the criticism of subsistence wage theory. Now, standard of living theory of wage. The standard of living theory of wage is an improved and refined version of subsistence theory of wage. According to this theory, wage is equals to standard of living of the worker. I repeat, according to this theory, wage is equals to the standard of living of the workers. If the standard of living is high, wages will be high and vice versa. Standard of living means the amount necessary to maintain the labor in the standard to which he is accustomed. Okay, I repeat, the standard of living means the amount necessary to maintain the labor in the standard to which he is accustomed. Now, criticism of this theory. This theory ignored the third union in collective bargaining. This theory does not explain the differences in wage in different occupations. According to this theory, the standard of living determines wages, but in actual practice, wages determining the standard of living. The standard of living cannot be measured correctly because it always changing. This is the criticism of standard of living theory of wage. Now, the wage fund theory of wage. Wage fund theory of wage. This theory was first propounded by Adam Smith, but credit goes to J.S. Mill, who perfected this theory. According to Mill, every employer will keep a given amount of capital for payment to the workers. I repeat, every employer, every owner will keep a given amount of capital for payment to the workers. It is known as wage fund. It is fixed and constant. Wage depends directly upon the number of laborers. Therefore, wage rate is equals to wage fund by number of laborers. If the number of laborers increases, the wage per worker will fall and vice versa. This is the theory of wage fund theory. So the owner will keep some amount of fund. So how many laborers are working? He will divide that fund. He will give to laborer. That is wage to laborer. If more laborer will work, less wage. If less laborer working, more wage. Criticism of this theory. This theory ignored about the trade unions in collective bargaining. This theory does not explain the differences in wage in different occupations. This theory does not explain the principle behind the creating of the wage fund. Okay, how the wage fund is created, that is not explained in this theory. According to this theory, wage is equals to all laborers. This means laborers are homogeneous, but in practical life, laborers are heterogeneous. Laborers are differentiated between themselves. Okay, this is the theory of wage fund theory of wage. Now, the residual claimant theory of wage. This theory was propounded by the American economist F.A. Walker. According to this theory, wage is a residual portion after paying the remuneration of all the other factors, namely land, capital, organization. In other words, wage is equals to whole product minus rent, interest, profit. So we have four factors of productions: land, labor, capital, organization. So land is getting rent. After that, entrepreneur getting profit, capital getting interest. The remaining amount is distributed among the labor. This is called a residual claimant. So residual claimant means the remaining amount goes to laborer as a wage. Okay, now criticism of this theory. This theory ignored about the trade union in collective bargaining. Okay, the trade union will bargain and get the more wage. This theory does not explain differences in wage in different occupations. So different occupations will get different wage. It does not explain. The theory deals with the supply side of labor only and completely ignore the demand side of labor. This theory says that the labor is a residual claimant, but in actual, labor is not a residual claimant, only the entrepreneur is the residual claimant. After giving rent to land, wage to laborer, interest to capital, remaining about the profit goes to entrepreneur. So in the practical, the entrepreneur is a residual claimant, not labor. These are the criticism of the residual claimant theory of wage. Now, marginal productivity theory of wage. According to marginal productivity theory of distribution, in general form, price is any factor is equals to marginal productivity of that factor. Price is any factor is equals to marginal productivity of that factor. That is also applied well in laborer. So according to marginal productivity theory of wage, the price of labor, wage is equals to marginal productivity of that labor. Okay. Criticism of this theory. This theory assumes that laborer are homogeneous. In reality, laborer are heterogeneous. This theory also assumes that laborer can be substituted each other, but in actual practice, laborer cannot be substituted each other. This theory is based on assumption of perfect mobility of laborers, but in real life, laborers are not perfectly mobile due to some factors like race, caste, religion, language, etc. The fourth criticism. This theory assumes that there is a perfect competition in labor market, but in real life, markets are imperfect rather than perfect. This theory further assumes that there is full employment of laborer, but in reality, there is a underemployment of laborers. This theory is applicable in the short run. This means this theory is not applicable in short run. This theory is applicable only in the long run. These are the criticism of the theory. Now I am going to explain the demand and the supply theory of wage. The various theories stated above are one-sided theories. They explain the determination of wage either from supply side or demand side. In order to rectify this defect, the modern economists propounded this demand and supply theory of wage. According to modern economists, the wage rate depends upon the demand and supply of labor. So the wage rate depends upon the demand and supply of labor. This theory states that the price of labor wage is just like the price of any other commodity. How the price will fixing for any other commodity? Based on demand and supply. Like that, the wage for labor is determined by demand and supply of labor. Now, demand for labor. The demand for laborer is not a direct demand. It is an indirect demand or derived demand. This means the demand for a laborer depends upon the demand for goods which they produce. That is, if the demand for goods increases, the demand for laborer which also increase, and vice versa. The demand for laborer depend upon their productivity also. There is a demand price for laborers. It depends upon the marginal productivity. That is to say, marginal revenue product of labor. The higher the marginal productivity of labor, higher the demand for them. Higher the demand for them, higher the wage for them. Okay. Now the supply of labor. The supply of labor refers to the number of laborers offer themselves for employment at different wage rates. The supply of laborer depends upon the size and the composition of population, the age and sex composition, the working hours, the labor laws, etc. If wage increases, the supply of labor will also increases and vice versa. The supply price of laborer depends on the standard of living of workers. Supply price of labor depends upon the standard of living of the laborers. On the supply side, standard of living of labor determine the wage. Now, equilibrium. The price of labor, that is wage, is determined by intersection of the curves of demand and supply of laborer. This can be explained with the help of diagram. In this diagram, x-axis represents demand for labor and supply of labor, and y-axis represents wage. DD is the demand curve and SS is the supply curve. Both curves intersect each other at point E, the equilibrium point. At this point, demand for and the supply of a laborer are equal. That is ON. Hence, the wage is fixed by OP. So, this is the theory explains the wage is determined by demand and supply. Now, wage differences. The wages are not uniform. Wages vary widely between different occupations, different countries, and different types. Let us discuss the reasons for differences in wage in different occupations. Efficiency of worker. So, the more efficiency, the more wage. Less efficiency, less wage. Now, nature of occupation. So, nature of occupation will change the wage rate. Then, regularity of employment, permanent and temporary. Okay, the permanent will get more, the temporary will get less wage. The cost of training. The cost of training expenses very expensive, then it will get the more wage. Then the supply of labor. If the supply of labor is large, the wages will be low. If the supply of labor is low, the wages will be high. Then the sex. The sex, generally male workers get the higher wages than the female workers. Okay, these are the things. Based on these things, the wages are differed in different occupations.